Hello, and welcome to On the Way. I'm glad that you decided to join me again today. So, I want to do a little quick recap of the last episode that I did. It was the episode where I had made the decision to end the marriage and move back to the United States. It's also the episode where the paint on my car mysteriously was repaired. So, if you haven't caught that episode, you might want to listen to it. It's pretty interesting. So I'm on my way to Illinois in prayer on the planes, because it's a couple of planes to get to where I need to go. Excited, sad, and broken. But I know that I'm moving forward and that I'm moving in the way that God wanted me to go. So I'm excited more than anything. So when I landed in Chicago, there were no firemen there. It was still during COVID because it was October of 2020. There were no firemen to tell me that I needed to quarantine, but I had decided to do that on my own just because I didn't want to. I was in airports, I was in trains and planes, and didn't want to expose my family or anyone in the community to anything I'd picked up. And so I had rented an Airbnb for 2 weeks and got there and set up, a place to stay for 2 weeks. So my son and his family moved to Illinois a couple of years before this, but my daughter, who still lived in Colorado, that's where we lived most of my life. I lived in Colorado, but they were living in Colorado when they moved to Illinois. My daughter had decided to join them later. I don't remember when in 2020, but it was during COVID. So it was a difficult move because she couldn't find a job because of COVID and she couldn't find a place to live. She had just started, so she was living with her brother. Her brother was kind enough to let her live with him and his family. And so she did secure a job, but she just couldn't find an apartment. So I thought when I get there, I am going to help her find an apartment. So I had nothing but time on my hands. And it was where I was staying was a nice place. So I got to hike a little bit there as well. And so I started looking on all the rental sites to find, see what I could find in that town. Not a very big town, but it's a college town. So, and this was October. So I was starting to worry that maybe all the apartments were gone because kids were in school. And they probably rented all the apartments. So anyway, I started looking on websites and couldn't find anything, but then they would populate to to trailers that were for rent, trailer homes that were for rent, and then they would populate into homes that were for rent. And I knew she didn't need a home, and they were pricey. I knew she couldn't afford a home, and I'd be helping her out while I stayed there. Once I moved, she'd be on her own. So I just kept looking, and then houses for sale popped up, and for some reason, this one house popped up that was just adorable. I just fell in love with it. It was a 1923, I want to say French Revival style home. But I thought, oh, next time I'm in town, I'm going to drive by this house because it was so cute. But anyway, so I had also decided I wanted to take a job because I was going to be there until April, because I thought the plan was I was going to move to Arizona, stay with my sister until I found a place, start working as a nurse again. That's what I thought my life was going to be. So I thought in the meantime, from now to April, when my ex-husband would be moving back to the States, I was going to find a job, but nursing wasn't an option, and because I was going to have to take a refresher course. I hadn't worked as a nurse for several years, so I thought, well, I'm going to maybe do food service. So I had never done food service, so I thought I was excited about that, and so I put in my application to a couple of places. One was like a national food chain, and things were starting to open up, and we were able to go out to eat again, and one was a national restaurant. And the other one I didn't think was a chain, but it was, just not as big. But I put in my applications, and I was talking to my daughter-in-law one day about not being able to find an apartment. I'm like, she can't find an apartment because there's nothing out there to find. And so she had suggested, well, we found our place because my brother drove around and he saw the sign. And so I said, oh, that's a good idea. So I took her advice and thought, when I go into town, I'm going to drive around and see if I can't find a place for rent. So I was a couple of days shy of being finished with my 2-week quarantine, self-imposed quarantine, and had decided I was going to go drive around and look for an apartment. I wanted to follow up on my application to see about being hired, and I also wanted to go look at that house. It was like still in my mind. It was on my radar to go look at it, so I thought, I'm going to go do that. So I headed into town one day. I was staying at a place that was about 20 miles, maybe 20, 30 minutes away from the town that my family lived in. And so I got into town and I started driving to an area that I thought would be a good place to look for an apartment, because I'd seen some apartments over there. So I was driving around there and I kept hearing, go over by the park. Now, I've had people ask me what that sounds like. It's not a voice. I don't hear a voice like audibly in my head. It's more like somebody has put a thought into my head. A purposeful thought is there. And it's like you can hear it, but you don't hear it. Not like when you have conversation with yourself, when you're, talking through something with yourself. It's not like that. Because there's no voice to it. It's just a thought that's very loud. And so that's the only way I can describe it. It doesn't scream at you because there's no voice to it, but it's like the thought is there prominently. And I know that those times in the hills in Germany, I was being taught how to hone in on that skill to be able to understand that it is God leading me somewhere or getting me to go somewhere to do something. Excuse me, taking a drink of water. So anyway, I get into town, I'm driving around, and there's nothing at these apartments, but I kept hearing, go over by the park. So I didn't know the town real well because I had only visited a few times in the years my son had moved his family there. But I knew that I knew where the park was because it was a good-sized park, but at the corner of the park there is a Ferris wheel. And so I thought, okay, I'll go by the park. So I go down the main road and take that right onto, it's called Main Street actually, where the Ferris wheel is. And the minute I turned, I see a big house on my left side, on the left side of the street, I should say, that you could tell was once a single family home. But because there were so many mailboxes, you knew that there were apartments, and there was a sign out in front that said, 2-bedroom apartment for rent. And there was a phone number. So I pulled into the parking lot, I called the number, and the lady said, I'm down the street. She met me there. I took a look at it, and I said, it's my daughter's apartment, but let me get in touch with her. Got it set up. She was there a couple of days later, put down the deposit, and got the apartment. So that was taken care of. And so then I kept hearing, go check on the job. And I'm like, okay. I knew where the one store was, the big national chain. I'm not sure if you're allowed to say names of companies on podcasts and things. I don't know if you get in trouble, so I'm just not going to go there. So it's a national chain. And so I kept hearing, go follow up. And I knew that was there. And so it's like I would have called it a strip mall. There's like a couple of big stores on either end, and there's like a lot of spaces for either an office or a store, a niche store. There's like a candle store in there and some restaurants. And so I go there, and I go in and I ask the girl who comes to the counter when I get there, and I said, can I talk to the manager? I'm following up on my application. And she goes, let me go check. So she comes back and she says she's just too busy, or I don't remember which, but you'll have to come back. I said, that's fine, I'll come back. So I just left it at that. But I was puzzled because I know I heard, go check up on the job. And so as I came out of there, I wanted to take a look around and see what other restaurants were there, or businesses were there. And so I see a few doors down, what looks like an empty space. There's a sign in the window. And so I go to look, and it said, open interviews for this other company, which is a chain, just not a big national chain. And, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be, I think. So I go in there and have an interview with the general manager at the time, and he hires me. And so training is going to be like in a week. It's a brand new building, brand new store. I mean, brand new. They've refurbished the building. It's in that big strip mall, but they've redone it to make it look gorgeous, and new kitchen. So it was exciting. It was going to be brand new. And so that was done, and I ran some errands, and that house, that cute house, was just in my mind, driving me crazy that I needed to go see this house. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go look. And so I pull up to this house, and it's just as charming in person, if not more, than it was in the pictures. And this has happened to me a few times. It doesn't happen often, but where I do something that I don't do consciously. I picked up my phone because I pulled over on the side of the road, was looking at the house, and I picked up my phone and I called the phone number on the sign, the realtor who was selling the home. And I said, is this house as cute on the inside as it is on the outside? And she said, yeah. And I said, I really need to see this house. Okay. Why I was doing that, I had no idea. I make the appointment for a couple of days later. I think it's a Friday. And I'm driving back to the place I was quarantining. And I'm thinking, what is that about? My plan, I thought, was I was moving to Arizona in April. I'd stay with my sister until I got a job, buy my own place. I thought my life was going to be in Arizona. But I was going to see this house, darn it. I don't know why, but I was. And so I get home, start packing up all my stuff, and my daughter has the keys to her apartment. Next few days, I'm bringing my stuff into her apartment because I'm going to live with her. And go to see the house. I go see the house. I pull up and I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm doing this, but here I am. The realtor was lovely and became a friend of mine later. And the minute I walked in that house, I knew it was my house, and I was excited. But I had no business applying for a mortgage. I didn't have a job that would sustain a mortgage, but I was still technically married. And I explained my situation to the realtor and said, I just have to see if he will do this for me. And she said, call me in the morning. So I get in my car, and I'm kind of confused because I don't know why I'm doing this. Because up to this point, like I said, my plan was to live in Arizona. So I decide, I'm sitting there just thinking about it and thinking how I'm going to ask my estranged husband, how I'm going to ask him if he'll do this for me. And as I'm actually typing him, because he was still in Germany, it was nighttime there, and I figured he was in bed, or I don't remember. But I sent him an email. I typed out an email. And my sister called me. She's a woman of faith, a devout Christian. And she called me and she said, Tammy, I was in prayer today, and God put it on my heart that you are not to come to Arizona. You are to be there with your children, that you need them, and they need you, and you need to stay there. And I said, that is so strange that you told me this, because I just looked at a house. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah. So we all knew that it was, God leading her to lead me. And so I emailed my husband and said, if this is, because what she told me I needed is, if he agreed to do it, I needed a power of attorney. And so I told him in the email, if you don't want to do this, I understand, and it's fine. But I need a power of attorney, so let me know. Email me, and I'll check it in the morning and see what you have to say. And if you say no, that's fine. The next morning, not only did I get an email with him saying he was going to do it, he already had the power of attorney for me. Being on base, he was able to get it quickly. And so I was very grateful to him for that. So we moved forward. And in these conversations with my sister, our mother, who lived in Arizona, was on oxygen. She had COPD, but she was in relatively good health, even though she had had cancer several times. She lived independently, had a little bit of help like for cleaning and bathing, but she lived on her own. And but I always wanted to take care of her, like in her last, I don't know, few years. I always wanted to be with her, even though she wanted to be independent. I just wanted to be the one to take care of her. And so as my sister and I talked about me staying in Illinois, I said, we talked about moving our mom there. So we had moved our mom from Michigan to Arizona because we thought we'd all be there. And my sister wasn't well at the time, and so she just couldn't take care of our mom. So part of the reason why I was going to Arizona was to take care of her. So anyway, long story short, we had decided, we'll see what mom says, but I've got plenty of room. She can move in with me. I'm so excited to have her, blah, blah, blah. But my mother passed away. I was trying to get a hold of her to tell her I'd gotten approved for the house and wanted to ask her if she would move in with me. But she had passed away, which was exactly how she wanted it to happen. So it's all good. She died independent and quickly. So it was a good thing. So I went forward and moved into the house. And my daughter, who thought I was moving too quickly, was a little skeptical of me moving quickly. But it's just sometimes how things go. When God leads me, I just go. And so when she first came into the house for the first time, and she sat on the couch, she said, I get it, Mom. This house has like healing in it. I feel peace here. And that's what I felt. I don't know if a house can heal you, but there was an aura or an energy that was so healing in that house. And she had been through some tough stuff, so she needed healing as well. So, and she was going to move in with me because there was no point in both of us paying for a place to stay when we could do it in one place. And so she moved in with me. And so real quickly, there was I got a cold call. So I closed on the house in January, and not too long after that, I got a cold call from one of the websites when I was looking for a job for swabbing inmates for COVID. And I took the job because I felt like I was being led to this job for whatever reason. It was a lot more money. It was a lot more hours. It was a lot of hard work, but I was looking forward to it. It was 2 different prisons. One was in the town, which was smaller. I want to say maybe 400 inmates. And the other one was about 30 minutes away and about 4,000 inmates. And their staff. We had to swab them all. And so then I took the job. And you only have a few seconds in front of each inmate. Because it's all about the label on the tube, swab the inmate, put it back in the tube, put it away, grab another one, and do the next one. So, but in those the first time I did it in the smaller prison, I was learning, figuring it out. The second time when I was in the larger prison, I was still trying to figure things out. But I knew that being in front of these men, for just those few seconds, I had a chance to make them feel some kind of connection with a human again. Because I know that's a hard life. And I know they made their decisions. This isn't a debate. I know that, they made mistakes and that's why they're there. These weren't maximum security, but they were murderers and they were rapists. They were men who did some really bad things. And so I'm not saying that, they shouldn't be in there because they made their choices and those things happened. But I still wanted to make them feel like somebody cared, even though I was just swabbing their nose. So by the 3rd or 4th time doing this, I started saying things to him like, God loves you. Did you talk to God today? Things like that, just in those few seconds that I had. And so many times you would see a spark in their eyes and they were glad that you reminded them. And as time went on, because I did this for almost 3 months, so as time went on, these men started wearing their crosses. They would bring their Bible up to the line. They would say, I said my prayers today. So it was so lovely. I was so blessed. I would thank God all the time. But as time went on, it was getting close to time when I was going to have to leave. I had to let the company know I was going to Arizona, and when I came back, I was not going to go back to work for them because I just felt like my time was done. And I had a brother that was voicing a lot of concern about me doing this, but I had to reassure him. There was always security guards right by me. I was never, or police officers, I'm not sure what they're called, but there was always someone right there. So I never felt afraid. I never felt worried until the last day. The very last day, not the last inmate, not the last gentleman that I had to swab. As we're swabbing, there's like 2 lines, and my daughter was working at that time for them, and she was next to me, and this young man's going back and forth, and then he stays in my line, and the way he's posturing, he's like, nervous and tensing up and raising his elbows and his shoulders, and I thought, he wants to hit me. He's really angry today, and this young man wants to hit me. And so all I did was say a quick prayer. Please, God, just don't let it hurt. Let me pass out before I feel it. Because there wasn't much I could do to stop him. And I don't know if the security guard was going to be able to stop him before it happened. I just left it in God's hands. I just wasn't going to worry about it because I don't worry. I just didn't want it to hurt. But anyway, and as he got closer, he was posturing. And I took my swab. And in the meantime, I didn't know this until after the guard had come up beside me, because later he told me he saw the same thing. And so as he got up to me, he was posturing. He didn't quite cock his fist, but he was posturing to hit me. And I went to swab him. And I said, God loves you, and so do I. And just as if he was an ice cube that melted, his arms and his shoulders just fell. And he looked humbled, and he looked almost defeated, but his head went down after I swabbed him. And I bent down to look at him so I could say to him, it's okay. I didn't say it verbally. I didn't speak those words. I just made eye contact with him. And he just left. He left the line and went back to his cell, and I took a deep breath, and I could hear the guard at that point next to me take a deep breath. And later, he said, what did you say to that guy? And I said that God loves him, and so do I. He goes, yeah, I don't think that'll work for me. And he said, he was going to hit you. I said, I know he was. I said, I'm glad you knew that, because I'm glad you were right beside me in case he was going to try it. But yeah, so I was very blessed that day. That I don't know if that made a difference for that young man, but it did in those moments, I think. Kept him out of trouble anyway. But anyway, that was a special time, and I cherish it. I will always cherish the men that I got to share some of God's love with. So anyway, April came. It was time for me to go to Arizona. My daughter was living with me, and we had something going on in the house that was really eating at her, and it got worse. So I'm going to share that in my next episode, because this one's run a little bit long. And I want to wrap this up and remind you that if you have a testimony or you want to share how God has moved in your life, please email me, TammyBlake.com. I'm sorry, TammyBlake@TammyBlake.com. And that's spelled TAMIBLAKE. And maybe we can chit-chat and get you on here, and we can share your story. I look forward to it. So until next week, I pray that you have a blessed week, and just reach out for God. He's waiting to hear from you. And I love you guys.